What if I told you that in some countries, you could be arrested for a TikTok post? Not for hate speech, not for a scam, just for a joke about God. Sounds crazy, right? But it's real. And it's happening in some of the most religious countries on the planet. Places where faith isn't just a Sunday habit. It's the operating system for the entire country. Laws, politics, marriage, even what you're allowed to say out loud. All of it runs through religion. Today we're going deep into the 5 most religious countries in the world. Not just going to church every Sunday or pray 5 times a day, every single day kind of religious. We're talking about the controversies, the court cases, the protests, and the stuff that gets people banned, jailed, or worse. Stick around, because number 3 has a law that shocked human rights groups worldwide. And the last country on this list has one of the most divisive debates on Earth happening right now. Let's get into it. Before we jump in, here's how most religious actually gets measured. Researchers don't just guess. According to Gallup's global surveys and Pew Research Center, they ask real people a simple question. Is religion an important part of your daily life? Then they combine that with how often people pray, how often they go to a church, mosque, or temple, and whether they identify with a religion at all. And when you crunch those numbers, the same regions keep showing up at the top again and again. Parts of Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. According to Pew's research, in some of these countries over 90% of people say religion is very important in their lives. Compare that to places like Sweden or Japan, where that number can drop below 20%. So these aren't just religious countries. These are countries where faith shapes almost everything: the constitution, the school system, even what's considered a crime. And that's exactly why the controversies here are so intense. When religion runs that deep, disagreements about it don't stay quiet. They turn into national headlines. Let's start with the 4th most populous country in the world. Indonesia doesn't get talked about enough, and that's wild, because it's the largest Muslim-majority country on the planet. We're talking over 240 million people who identify as Muslim, more than the entire population of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Yemen combined. According to Statista's 2025 survey data, around 99% of Indonesian adults say they follow a religion. That's one of the highest rates measured anywhere in the world. Here's the twist though, Indonesia isn't technically an Islamic state. Its national philosophy called Pancasila officially recognizes 6 religions: Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, and the Constitution promises freedom of belief. On paper, that sounds like a pretty balanced setup. In practice, it's a lot messed up. Indonesia has one of the most aggressively enforced blasphemy laws in the world, and it's not some old dusty rule nobody uses. People get prosecuted under it regularly. The most famous case involved Jakarta's former governor, a Christian politician of Chinese descent, who made an offhand comment about a verse from the Quran during a campaign speech in 2016.
Kan bisa aja dalam hati kecil Bapak Ibu nggak bisa pilih saya. Ya kan dibohongin pakai surat Al-Maidah 51 macam-macam itu. Itu hak Bapak Ibu.
That single comment triggered massive street protests. Hundreds of thousands of people showed up demanding he be punished. He ended up losing the election and then got sentenced to 2 years in prison for blasphemy. That case didn't just end there. It changed Indonesian politics. Analysts say it showed how religious identity could be weaponized in elections, and how a mob's outrage online could turn into real prison time offline. Then there's Aceh province, which operates under its own version of Sharia law. The only place in Indonesia that does. Public caning is a legal punishment there for things like gambling, drinking alcohol, or having a relationship outside of marriage. Video of these public canings has gone viral more than once, sparking outrage from human rights organizations who call it cruel and outdated, while local officials defend it as cultural and religious tradition that the community itself supports. On top of that, LGBTQ+ rights are a constant flashpoint. Being gay isn't technically illegal under national law outside Aceh, but LGBTQ+ Indonesians regularly face raids, public shaming, and local bylaws that criminalize them anyway. Rights groups have documented a rise in anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric from political and religious leaders over the past decade, especially as conservative Islamic movements have gained more influence in local government. So you've got this strange contradiction. A country that's constitutionally pluralistic, but where local enforcement can look completely different depending on which province you're standing in. That tension between official tolerance and local religious enforcement is basically the heartbeat of Indonesia's ongoing controversy. Pakistan consistently ranks near the very top of every religiosity survey out there. According to Pew Research, over 90% of Pakistanis say religion is very important in their daily lives, among the highest percentages recorded anywhere on Earth. Islam isn't just the majority religion here, it's baked into the country's founding identity. Pakistan was literally created in 1947 as a homeland for South Asian Muslims. This is the big one. Pakistan's blasphemy laws are among the harshest in the world, and unlike a lot of countries where blasphemy just means a fine or a few months in jail, in Pakistan, it can carry the death penalty. To be clear, nobody has actually been executed by the state under this specific law yet, but that almost makes it more disturbing because it hasn't stopped mob violence and vigilante killings.
This mob beat a university student to death in Pakistan for something he posted on Facebook.
The most internationally known case is Asia Bibi, a Christian farm worker who was sentenced to death in 2010 after a dispute with co-workers over sharing water from a well. She spent 8 years on death row before Pakistan's Supreme Court finally overturned her conviction in 2018. That ruling triggered massive nationwide protests, with hardline religious groups shutting down major cities, demanding the judges be killed for daring to free her. She and her family eventually had to flee the country entirely for their own safety, relocating to Canada. And she's not an isolated case. According to human rights organizations tracking these numbers, dozens of people accused of blasphemy have been killed by mobs or vigilantes over the past 2 decades, often before their trial even finishes. Governor Salman Taseer, a senior politician who publicly criticized the blasphemy law and supported Asia Bibi, was assassinated by his own bodyguard in 2011. The bodyguard was treated as a hero by huge crowds of supporters. That tells you just how explosive this topic is. Beyond blasphemy law specifically, religious minorities in Pakistan, including Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, and especially the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, report ongoing discrimination. The Ahmadiyya community is a particularly striking case. Pakistan's constitution officially declares them non-Muslim, even though they identify as Muslim themselves. They're legally barred from calling their places of worship mosques or using standard Islamic greetings in public. Rights groups have documented targeted attacks on Ahmadiyya communities for decades. Then there's the ongoing national debate over how religious law intersects with women's rights. Things like inheritance law, honor-based violence, and forced conversions of minority women, which human rights groups say remains a serious, underreported problem in parts of the country. Pakistan is a nuclear power, a country of over 240 million people, and a key player in regional politics. So when these controversies hit international headlines, they don't just affect Pakistan. They ripple through global conversations about religious freedom everywhere. This is the country I teased at the start, and it's probably the one you expected to see on this list. Saudi Arabia isn't just religious. It's the literal birthplace of Islam, home to the 2 holiest sites in the entire religion, Mecca and Medina. Millions of Muslims travel there every year for Hajj, one of the largest religious gatherings on the planet. According to that same Statista 2025 data we mentioned earlier, 99% of Saudi adults say they follow a religion, tied with Indonesia for the highest rate measured. Here's what makes Saudi Arabia genuinely unique compared to almost every other country on this list. For decades, public practice of any religion other than Islam was completely banned. No churches, no temples, no synagogues, no nothing anywhere in the country. Non-Muslim foreign workers, and there are millions of them, historically had to practice their faith privately, behind closed doors, or risk arrest. According to reporting from religious freedom watchdog groups, this made Saudi Arabia one of the only countries on earth with 0 public places of worship for other religions for most of its modern history. That's actually starting to shift under recent reforms. The government has floated ideas about allowing some non-Muslim worship spaces as part of a broader modernization push. But critics point out that meaningful legal protection for religious minorities is still basically non-existent, and conversion away from Islam remains a serious offense. For years, Saudi Arabia operated under what's called the male guardianship system, where women legally needed permission from a male relative, a father, husband, even a son, to do things like get a passport, travel abroad, or even drive a car. That driving ban became a global symbol of the country's restrictions and sparked years of activism, including women risking arrest by filming themselves driving in protest.
2 Saudi women have been arrested for driving a car in the capital, Riyadh, and for refusing to call their male custodians to take them home. The women were spotted by police driving near a shopping center with one behind the wheel and the other filming.
The government has actually rolled back parts of this system recently as part of its Vision 2030 reform push. Women can now drive, travel more freely, and attend public events they couldn't before. But activists who pushed for these very reforms have, in some documented cases, been arrested and imprisoned anyway, which international human rights groups have called deeply hypocritical, reforming the law in public while jailing the people who demanded it. For a long time, Saudi Arabia had a dedicated religious police force, officially called the Committee for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, that could stop people in public for things like inappropriate dress, mixing between unmarried men and women, or not closing shops during prayer time.
Inside one of Saudi Arabia's upscale shopping malls, Yasser films the men who enforce the country's Islamic laws, the Saudi religious police. Dressed in traditional Islamic clothing, they patrol the streets and shopping malls. Their official title is the Committee for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice.
Their powers have been significantly reduced since 2016 as part of the country's broader liberalization, but the legacy of decades of strict public religious enforcement is still something the country is actively working through. Saudi Arabia is genuinely trying to rebrand itself. New entertainment venues, mixed-gender concerts, tourism campaigns. But critics argue this is happening alongside continued restrictions on free speech and dissent, creating a country that looks more open on the surface, while human rights organizations say core freedoms remain tightly controlled underneath. Nigeria is a fascinating case because it's not dominated by one religion. It's almost perfectly split. Roughly half the country identifies as Christian, concentrated mostly in the south, and roughly half identifies as Muslim, concentrated mostly in the north. According to Pew Research's data on religious diversity, Nigeria has one of the largest combined Christian and Muslim populations of any country on earth, and both groups report extremely high levels of religious commitment, daily prayer, weekly worship attendance, the whole picture. That near 50-50 split sounds like it could be a peaceful story about coexistence. Unfortunately, it's also the source of some of the most serious religious conflict anywhere in the world today. 12 northern Nigerian states have adopted Sharia law as their legal framework, at least for Muslim residents, covering everything from banking to criminal punishment. This includes, in some regions, the possibility of stoning as a punishment for adultery under Sharia courts, sentences that have sparked massive international outcry when handed down, most famously the case of Amina Lawal in the early 2000s, whose death sentence for adultery was eventually overturned after global pressure, but which still highlighted just how real that legal possibility remains on paper. This is the controversy most people have actually heard of. Boko Haram, a militant extremist group operating primarily in northeastern Nigeria, has waged a violent insurgency for over a decade, targeting both Christians and Muslims who don't align with their extreme interpretation of Islam. Their 2014 kidnapping of over 270 schoolgirls from Chibok sparked the global Bring Back Our Girls movement, drawing attention from world leaders and celebrities alike. According to humanitarian organizations tracking the conflict, the insurgency has displaced millions of people and remains one of the deadliest ongoing conflicts tied to religious extremism in the world. There's also ongoing violence between mostly Muslim herding communities and mostly Christian farming communities in Nigeria's Middle Belt region. On the surface, this is a conflict over land and grazing rights made worse by climate change and population growth, but it consistently takes on religious dimensions, with attacks on churches, mosques, and entire villages tied to one faith or the other. Human rights organizations have raised alarms about the scale of the violence, with some analysts arguing it now causes more deaths annually than Boko Haram itself. Nigeria shows us something important. Religious controversy isn't always about a government cracking down on one faith. Sometimes it's about two massive religious communities living side by side, and what happens when that balance gets disrupted by extremism, land pressure, or political manipulation. Let's close with Bangladesh, a country that's routinely near the very top of every religiosity ranking. According to older Gallup World Poll data, Bangladesh recorded one of the highest percentages ever measured for people saying religion is important in their daily life, 99%. That's basically the entire adult population. Bangladesh is around 90% Muslim, and it was actually founded with secularism as one of its core constitutional principles back in 1971. But over the decades, Islam was also declared the state religion, creating a built-in tension between secular constitution and official state religion that keeps surfacing in national debates. Here's the controversy that put Bangladesh on the international human rights radar in a serious way. Starting around 2013 and continuing for several years, a string of secular writers, bloggers, and publishers who had criticized religious extremism or promoted atheist viewpoints online were murdered, several of them hacked to death in broad daylight by extremist attackers. According to reporting from international press freedom organizations, this created a genuine climate of fear among writers and academics, with many fleeing the country or going into hiding after receiving death threats for their online posts. The government's response to this was itself controversial. Critics argued that instead of focusing entirely on prosecuting the killers, some officials suggested writers should be more careful about criticizing religion, which free speech advocates said basically shifted blame onto the victims. Even though Bangladesh is constitutionally secular, minority communities, Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians, who together make up less than 10% of the population, have reported periodic waves of violence, particularly during politically tense moments like elections or regional conflicts. Human rights groups have documented incidents of temple vandalism and attacks on minority neighborhoods, often triggered by rumors of blasphemy spreading on social media before facts are even confirmed. Bangladesh has also seen growing tension between its secular political establishment and increasingly organized Islamist movements pushing for stricter religious law, including calls for a formal blasphemy law similar to Pakistan's. This has become one of the defining political fault lines in the country over the past decade, shaping elections, protests, and public policy debates that are still unfolding today. What makes Bangladesh such a compelling case is that contradiction at its core, a nation founded on secular ideals, with sky-high personal religiosity, caught in an ongoing tug-of-war over how much religion should shape its laws. So here's the thread connecting all 5 of these countries. It's not that religion itself causes conflict. Billions of people practice their faith peacefully every single day. And for most people in these countries, religion is a source of comfort, community, and meaning, not controversy. The real pattern is what happens when religion and state power get tangled together. When blasphemy becomes a crime instead of just a disagreement. When one religious group's law applies to everyone, even people who don't share that faith. When extremist minorities within a religion try to speak for the entire community through violence. That's where things get genuinely dangerous, and that's exactly why these 5 countries keep making international headlines. And honestly, this isn't some far-off issue that doesn't affect the rest of us. These debates about free speech, minority rights, and where religious law should end and personal freedom should begin, they're happening in some form almost everywhere, just at different intensities. So here's my question for you. Out of these 5 countries, which controversy shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, And honestly, some of the best follow-up video ideas have come straight from you guys. If this video actually taught you something new, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think. And if you want more deep dives like this one into the world's biggest cultural and religious flashpoints, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because trust me, the next country on my list might surprise you even more than this one did. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.